Hello, my dear history lovers. Let's get to today's story. Oh, but before we start, after you watch it, leave a comment below to tell me what you thought of today's story, okay? Your comment is important to help me know what you like to see here. Let's go. Chloe was the kind of girl no one really noticed. Quiet, always hiding behind a book, she spent her days at school trying to be invisible. Her eyes, always alert, rarely met anyone else's gaze. Chloe seemed content with her solitude, preferring the silent company of pages to that of people. Jhones and his friends always saw her, but they never thought much of her until one day, while laughing in the courtyard, someone had an idea. "She's so shy, she's probably never even spoken to a guy," Junior commented, laughing. "I bet none of us could make her fall in love." Paul, always the leader of the teasing, gave a sly smile and looked directly at Jhones. "Jhones, how about a bet? I bet you can't make Chloe fall in love with you." 5 days. 5 days for her to be completely head over heels. "Are you in?" Jhones hesitated for a moment. He had never really paid much attention to Chloe, aside from noticing how she was always alone. But the idea of a challenge, and the teasing of his friends, sparked something inside him. 5 days? Jhones asked, pretending to think it over. "I'll do it in 3. His friends burst out laughing, and the bet was on. To them, Chloe was just a shy girl, too timid to defend herself from a prank like that, and Jhones, with his carefree charm, thought it would be a piece of cake. The next day, Jhones put his plan into action. He saw her sitting alone, as always, with a book in her lap. He approached with his best smile, determined to start the conquest. "Hey, Chloe," he said, stopping beside her. She briefly looked up, surprised, but quickly returned her focus to the book. "Hi," she responded, not showing much interest. Jhones sat down next to her, pretending to be interested in the book she was reading. "What are you reading?" he asked, leaning in a little closer. Chloe glanced at him from the corner of her eye, suspicious. It was rare for anyone to try to talk to her, especially one of the popular boys like Jhones. "A book," she replied simply, closing it slightly so he couldn't see the cover. "Really? I love reading too. Maybe we should talk more about it," Jhones said lightly, trying to keep the conversation going. Chloe didn't respond, only offering a faint smile before returning to her book, as if closing the door to a world Jhones had no access to. It was at that moment that he realized, this wouldn't be as easy as he had thought. Chloe wasn't like the other girls he had known. She had an invisible barrier, and a smile or joke wouldn't be enough to break through it. But Jhones wasn't ready to give up. A bet was a bet, and now it was a matter of pride. So, he decided to change his approach. In the following days, Jhones became more persistent, but in a different way. He knew that for Chloe, empty words wouldn't mean anything. She was the kind of person who valued small actions. So he began to observe her more closely, not just to fulfill the bet, but to truly understand who she was. He sat near her in history class, started greeting her every time he saw her in the halls, and even set aside the loud jokes with his friends to focus on his mission. Every day, he worked to gain her trust. Instead of talking about books he knew nothing about, he began asking about her interests, what she liked to do outside of school, what her dreams were. Chloe, in turn, began to lower her guard, slowly at first. She gave small smiles, then longer answers than usual. Jhones was making progress, but with each conversation, he realized Chloe wasn't just a shy girl. She had a depth he hadn't expected, and the more he tried to get closer, the more intrigued he became. What had started as a simple bet, a joke between friends, was turning into something more serious for Jhones. He couldn't deny that now, he genuinely wanted to be her friend, maybe even something more. But time was running out, and he knew his friends were waiting for the conclusion of the bet. What they didn't know was that, for Jhones, the bet was starting to lose its meaning. Paul was on the phone with Jhones, irritated by the lack of progress in the plan they had put together. They had thought it would be easy, just a quick joke to have fun at Chloe's expense, but things were spiraling out of control. "Don't be stupid," Paul complained. "Win her over first, you can't force things." On the other end of the line, Jhones sighed, frustrated. He had never been the type of guy who knew how to handle girls, let alone someone as guarded as Chloe. Jhones protested angrily, "I'm not romantic, Paul. I don't know what to do. She doesn't react to anything." Paul let out a dry laugh, staying calm. "You don't need to be romantic, idiot. Just be nice to her. Say nice things, be polite. Most girls fall for it when you treat them well. I'm helping you a lot here, now go and do what you need to do. Jhones hung up the phone, feeling even more nervous than before. Paul's words echoed in his head as he tried to convince himself to stick with the plan. He had never been good at being sweet, but he had to make it work. After all, it was just a bet, right? He just needed to pretend for a while. In the days that followed, Jhones did his best to be as polite as possible with Chloe. He approached her in the hallways, smiled more, complimented what she was wearing, and made pleasant comments. "You're doing great," he kept telling himself, but nothing seemed to work the way he had expected. Chloe wasn't easily swayed. She was different from the other girls he'd dealt with before. When she smiled, it was shy, almost insecure, and that started to affect him in unexpected ways. Then, something he never predicted happened. Jhones began to genuinely like Chloe. At first, he tried to ignore it, convincing himself it was just part of the plan, but it was impossible to deny. He found himself thinking about her during classes, looking at the spots where she usually stood, waiting for a moment to talk to her. She wasn't the easy target he thought she'd be. Chloe was complex, difficult to understand, and that intrigued him. A few days later, unable to handle the situation anymore, Jhones approached the guys in the school courtyard. They were waiting for an update on the bet, laughing and joking as usual. "Guys, I can't keep doing this," he said, his voice tense. His friends stopped laughing, staring at him in surprise. "What happened?" Paul asked with a grin, ready for another joke. Jhones shook his head, clearly confused by his feelings. "She's way too complicated. I underestimated all of this." Paul started laughing, thinking it was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. "You've got to be kidding. Or did you actually fall for her?" he said, unable to contain his laughter. Jhones felt his face flush, forcing himself to deny it. "Me? In love? Never," he replied quickly, but his voice wasn't as firm as he wanted. He walked away from the group, feeling the weight of reality on his shoulders. What had started as just a game, a stupid bet, was turning into something much bigger. He found himself caught in a web of emotions he hadn't expected, and the truth was simple: he had really fallen for Chloe. What had started as a joke had changed everything, and now, Jhones didn't know how to get out of this without hurting her, or himself. As his friends continued laughing, Jhones wondered how things had become so complicated. Chloe, on the other hand, had slowly started to let her guard down. At first, she kept her usual distance, always cautious, always sensing there was something more behind Jhones' sudden attention. But over time, she began to trust him, to believe that maybe he was different. The way he made her laugh, the way he seemed to genuinely listen to what she had to say, made her open up in a way she never had with anyone before. They started spending more time together. Jhones would accompany her to the library, sometimes pretending to be interested in books he'd never read, just to be near her. They talked about everything, from their passions and fears to their most secret dreams. And without Jhones even realizing it, the line between the original plan and his true feelings started to blur. Each day made the situation more complicated for Jhones. He knew he was getting involved, knew there was far more at stake than just a silly bet. Chloe wasn't a joke, she was real, and every time he looked at her, the guilt inside him grew. His conscience weighed heavy. Regret began to flood his thoughts, and he knew he couldn't keep deceiving her much longer. One day, they were sitting together in the library, laughing over a story Chloe was telling. But Jhones' laughter slowly faded, and Chloe noticed something was wrong. The expression on his face changed, and he seemed distracted, as if he were fighting some internal battle. "Chloe," Jhones began, his voice low and hesitant, calling her name in a tone she had never heard before. Chloe frowned, confused. "What's wrong?" she asked. Jhones took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words he needed to say. He couldn't lie anymore, couldn't bear the guilt that had been eating away at him. "Will you forgive me?" he asked, his eyes filled with regret. Chloe looked at him, surprised. "Forgive you for what?" she asked, not understanding what he was talking about. Jhones lowered his gaze, unable to look her in the eye. He knew that what was about to happen could destroy everything they had built. But in the end, he lacked the courage and walked away from her. As he distanced himself, two girls from the school, who had been watching everything from afar, approached Chloe. They seemed eager to talk, wanting to reveal something Chloe hadn't fully realized yet. "Chloe," one of the girls said with a concerned tone, "we need to tell you something." Chloe, still shaken by Jhones' reaction, looked at the two girls with a confused expression. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The second girl hesitated for a moment, then said, "Jhones made a bet with Paul. He was going to win money if he could kiss you." Chloe blinked, disbelief tightening her chest more than ever. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice fading away. "I overheard Jhones and Paul talking about it weeks ago," the girl continued, lowering her voice as if to soften the blow. "It was all a bet. They wanted to trick you." Chloe felt the ground vanish beneath her. Tears began to fill her eyes, and the pain of betrayal cut deeper than she could have ever imagined. She had believed that, despite Jhones' confession, his feelings were sincere now. But hearing this, she realized the truth was even crueler. She ran away, seeking a place where she could be alone, where she could cry without anyone watching. The girl's words swirled in her mind. Jhones had deceived her from the start, and even after everything, he hadn't told her the real reason behind the bet. He had asked for forgiveness, but he had never confessed that he truly loved her. That moment, the trust she had built, the bond that seemed so real between them, crumbled. When Jhones tried to approach her again, she didn't have the strength for another conversation. "You were never my friend," Chloe cried out through her tears, her voice heavy with pain. "Go away, Jhones. Go away and don't ever come near me again." Jhones stood there, devastated. He knew he had made an irreparable mistake. Without another word, he walked away. After that day, Chloe never spoke to him again. Months passed, high school ended, and after graduation, their paths completely diverged. Chloe moved on with her life, distancing herself from everything that had happened. Years later, Jhones had changed a lot. He had found a job at a local radio station and, little by little, began carving out a new path for himself. 2 years had passed since that fateful bet. It was Valentine's Day, and Jhones was on the air, hosting his show. The romantic songs filled the studio, but what occupied Jhones' mind wasn't the generic love he talked about on the program. It was Chloe. He couldn't stop thinking about her, especially on this day. Jhones gripped the microphone firmly as his voice echoed through the radio, heavy with regret and nostalgia. "Sometimes life throws surprises at you that you never see coming," he began, his voice low. "What started as a silly game with friends ended up showing me how much of a fool I had been. I never imagined that, in the middle of a meaningless bet, I would fall for such an incredible girl. She was special in a way I had never seen before, and I only realized it when it was already too late." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I made a mistake, and I regret every step I took for the wrong reasons. In the end, all I have left are memories of that love, of something that could have been, but will never be again. Now all that's left is the what if, and the memories of how I let the best thing that ever happened to me slip away. If I could give one piece of advice about love, it's this: don't treat it like a game. When you find someone special, don't wait to realize their worth. Don't let pride or a silly bet make you lose something that might never come back. Love truly, while there's still time." As he spoke, Jhones had no idea that Chloe, in another part of town, was listening to the show. She recognized his voice immediately. Her heart raced as she realized Jhones was talking about her. "I know love is wonderful, but it's also complicated. It takes more than just romance to keep something real. I've seen love up close, and I know how it can change you. And one day, I hope to have another chance to fix what I messed up." On the other end, Chloe stood up quickly, a whirlwind of emotions flooding her, anger, sadness, but also a glimmer of hope she couldn't ignore. Without thinking much, she rushed out of the house and headed straight to the radio station where Jhones was. Upon arriving, Chloe nervously asked the receptionist, "Hi, does Jhones work here? Is he in?" The receptionist, surprised, responded, "Yes, he's here, but who wants to see him?" Chloe hesitated for a second before answering. Minutes later, Jhones stepped out of the studio for a break and was shocked to see Chloe standing there, waiting for him. She had come from far away, determined, but with the same intensity in her eyes of someone still carrying hurt. Over those years, Jhones had changed a lot, but seeing her there made him realize that no amount of time could erase what he still felt for her. Jhones and Chloe reunited in the radio studio, where he finally confessed all of his regret. He asked for forgiveness, making it clear that he had changed and that all he wanted now was a fresh start, no expectations, no lies. Chloe, still carrying the pain of the past, hesitated, but seeing Jhones' sincerity, she decided that maybe it was time to let the past go. "We can try again," she said with a soft smile. But this time, no bets. Jhones smiled, relieved. No bets, he promised. And so together, they gave a new chance to what could be a true new beginning. If you enjoyed this story and want to follow more heartwarming narratives like this one, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is so important for us to keep bringing more stories that touch the heart. And of course, hit the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos. Thank you for being here.